From pistols to rocket launchers and everything in between, nothing quite beats a conventional firearm whenever a fight breaks out. But with so many different firearms available to you in Streets of Rogue, it can be hard to decide what to use and when. Thankfully, you have me as your guide. How yinz doing? I'm an Ian, and this is the Streets of Rogue weapon guide to firearms. We will start with the pistol, since it's one of the most common firearms in the entire game. This gun is a starting item for the cop, goon, as well as the creeps and bloods, and is a common drop from their NPC equivalents. In terms of damage, the pistol will do 2 plus your firearms attribute in damage per bullet. Please keep in mind that your firearms attribute also affects bullet spread, meaning DPS will be heavily affected by this attribute, even more so than the previously covered melee weapons. Given a low DPS output compared to all the other firearms in the game, you might make the mistake of thinking this is a weapon you'll want to swap out at some point. However, the truth is far more interesting since the pistol boasts a massive 30 ammo capacity, dwarfing most other guns in the game. This means the pistol is a must-have for any gunslinging characters who rely heavily on firearms to do all damage output, and this is because ammo is something you're going to run out of on a gun-to-gun basis. Meaning if you want to use your gun for a variety of things such as setting off generators from outside a window or simply finishing off weaker foes from across the map, the pistol is a must-have weapon, as it is a great weapon to have for whenever you have a fun utility use for your guns but also don't want to waste your ammo on the more useful ones in battle. Speaking of those more useful guns, let's start covering those, shall we? The shotgun is a starting item for the shopkeeper character and is a common drop from their NPC equivalents as well as the occasional bartender NPC. The shotgun will fire 3 bullets in a cone in front of you while pushing you back slightly from the recoil. Individually, these 3 bullets actually do the same damage as the pistol, however you're firing 3 of them at once, meaning at point blank range you can do 3 times the damage you would with a pistol when you're using the shotgun. The only downside to the shotgun really is the fact that your ammo capacity is limited to 12, meaning you won't have the ammo to go guns blazing with this weapon all the time. Interestingly, the recoil you receive while using this thing can be used as a good getaway tool for those of you who have the skinny nerdlinger trait. Which means if you have a low speed stat, whether due to a slow debuff or a low base speed attribute to begin with, you can use the skinny nerdlinger trait alongside the shotgun to make a quick getaway in dire straits by simply firing the gun in the opposite direction you wish to go. But if that sounds like a good idea, I strongly recommend this next gun. The machine gun is a starting item for the soldier, and can most commonly be found as a mission reward as well as dropped from the mobsters and super cops using them in the downtown and uptown levels of the game. In regards to damage, it is equal to the pistol in terms of how much damage you're doing on a per bullet basis. However, as you might have suspected from the name, the machine gun has a much higher rate of fire than the pistol. To help you get as much mileage out of this enhanced fire rate as possible, the gun also has an extended magazine compared to the pistol of 50 bullets, or 69 if you're using the ammo stock mod on it.
Nice.
Naturally, due to the insane rate of fire compared to all the other firearms in the game, the machine gun will be superior to most other weapons in terms of raw DPS output. This does, however, assume that you have any significant stat investment into the firearms attribute, since if you try to use this gun when you have the minimum of 1 in your firearms attribute, you'll find that your accuracy will be comparable to a 7-foot-tall man trying to use a urinal in a public restroom. Sure, in theory, some of it's going to go into its intended target, but we all know that the majority of what's coming out of there is not going to hit what you want it to. Still, as previously mentioned, if you have the skinny nerdlinger trait, this gun has 1 additional use even if you can't land a single bullet against your intended targets. That being as an escape tool, since the recoil you'll receive from firing this gun whilst having the skinny nerdlinger trait will be so severe that it can actually be used as a way to get away from opponents, effectively creating yourself a 2-dimensional jetpack of sorts. This can be particularly helpful if you're playing a non-combat oriented character like the hacker on a very combat oriented floor, such as a disaster floor such as a riot or a zombie outbreak. But if you're dealing with a zombie outbreak, there is one gun that just trumps all others in that regard. That being the Ghost Gibber. The Ghost Gibber is unique in the sense that NPCs do not drop this weapon whatsoever. It can only be acquired from mission rewards as well as in the starting inventory of the Scientist character. Interestingly, the Ghost Gibber is the only weapon in the entire game that benefits from having a high firearm stat, but is not affected in regards to its accuracy. This is because the Ghost Gibber is effectively a laser gun that only damages certain targets. These certain targets consist of undead, werewolves, and anyone standing in a body of water. How deep this body of water doesn't matter. It can be a puddle or they can be swimming in a pool, it does the same amount of damage either way. Even at NPCs that this weapon can't damage directly, however, it can still be useful since it allows you to passively push people around without drawing aggro whatsoever, meaning you can push people into traps, poisons, or anything else you want really. This also makes the Ghost Gibber an amazing tool to have whenever you're dealing with a zombie outbreak disaster. This is because the laser you shoot out of your gun affects zombies, but not normal NPCs, unless of course those normal NPCs are in water, but we'll ignore that for now. Since this gun can very quickly vaporize zombies and doesn't hurt other NPCs, you can use this as a way to quickly deal with large hordes of zombies without worrying about killing your meat shields, fellow citizens on the floor. However, the most common use for the Ghost Gibber, as the name implies, is to deal with ghosts, since they are otherwise impossible to kill without this weapon. Without the Ghost Gibber, the graveyard is nothing more than an area you want to avoid causing mass property damage in order to avoid having indestructible NPCs trying to kill you. However, with this gun, they effectively become piles of XP and money, since ghosts tend to drop a decent chunk of change when they get killed, as well as the gravestones having a chance to do the same. As a result, vandalizing graveyards is a very effective way to make a lot of money in this game if you have the Ghost Gibber. Otherwise, it's too risky to be worth the effort in my opinion, since you'll probably end up wasting all the money you earn on healing items in order to just get yourself back to where you started with this tactic otherwise. As you probably deduced from the abilities of this gun, the Ghost Gibber is a great utility to have in your back pocket, but is far from a mainstay weapon that you'll want to be using the majority of the time. So if you're looking for a good gun that can actually be useful in all situations instead of very niche scenarios, you're going to want to consider this next weapon on the list. The Revolver is the most powerful gun in the game in regards to damage per bullet. Dealing your Firearms attribute times 3 with an additional 6 damage on top of that, this gun will instantly kill most early game foes, especially if you have a high Firearms attribute with your starting character. Sadly, however, there are no starting characters unless you make a custom to actually start with this gun whatsoever. This means you'll have to rely on RNGesus to give you this as a mission reward if you want to use this gun whatsoever early game if you aren't using a custom character. The only other way you can realistically acquire the Revolver on a typical playthrough is as a drop from the NPCs that use this against you. This will most commonly be in the form of the Super Cops in the Uptown level, meaning there is no safe and reliable way to acquire the Revolver on a typical run with any reliability unless you make a custom character. But even if you use seed manipulation, get lucky with your mission rewards, or just make a custom character, don't go thinking that this gun is some sort of silver bullet solution to all of your combat-related problems. This is because this gun has two major drawbacks that need to be considered whenever you use it. The fact that you only get 10 shots before you need to restock your ammo supply, as well as the fact that it has a slow recharge before you can fire the gun. This means, unlike the pistol, where you can just button mash to shoot as fast as you want, the Revolver forces you to shoot at a slow, consistent pace. This means the Revolver is ill-suited for those of you who are trying to deal with large groups of weak enemies, since while it can easily kill low-health targets or just weak enemies in general outright with a high enough Firearms attribute, you won't be able to necessarily deal with all the opponents you're fighting. In fact, if you need to kill more than 10 people on a floor, this gun simply will not be enough to do the job, generally speaking. But if you need to kill someone quickly and you don't care how many people can hear the gunshots on the floor, this is easily one of the best guns in the game. In regards to weapons that actually benefit from the Firearm stat, the Revolver is unquestionably the best gun in the entire game. However, there is one weapon that is superior to it that doesn't actually benefit from the Firearm stat whatsoever.
If God had wanted you to live, he would not have created me!
The rocket launcher is a starting weapon for the robot character. The only other ways to acquire this weapon with any degree of reliability is through mission rewards as well as from the Killer Robot Disaster, where if you kill the killer robot the disaster is named after, he will drop this weapon. As you probably deduced from the name, this weapon fires a rocket that does a flat 80 damage independent of your Firearms attribute. Naturally, I advise against placing the silencer modification on this armament, since the silence effect only applies to the initial firing of the rocket, not the explosion created by said rockets that you'll be firing with this. And while technically speaking this is unquestionably one of, if not the best weapons in the entire game, I strongly advise not using this as your go-to weapon, partially because you'll run out of ammo way too quickly if you try doing that, but mostly because the explosions you create with this weapon can be used in far more useful methods than just killing opponents outright. For instance, there are very few forms of terrain in the entire game's generation that are immune to rocket launcher shots. This means you can turn just about any wall in the entire game into a doorway for you to pass through without harm, as long as you make sure that you're far enough away that you don't get caught in your own explosions, of course. It is also possible to use the rocket launcher to destroy just about any inanimate object from across the map, so long as there's no disaster floor going on, that is. This is because you can still teleport while your rocket is being fired so long as nothing is hostile near you. This means if you're quick about teleporting in the map menu, you can easily fire this rocket launcher down an alleyway towards the thing you want destroyed and then teleport across the map to your next mission objective or the exit elevator if you so desire, or really anything your heart desires honestly, since realistically as long as you're far enough away that the cops won't be able to see it was you who fired the rocket, you'll be fine. Naturally, due to this weakness, I strongly recommend getting the Blast Survivor trait so that it no longer exists. I also highly recommend grabbing the Blast Master trait since it will allow you to destroy metal walls with your explosives, which means you'll be able to use this to tunnel through metal buildings, which is something you won't be able to do otherwise with this gun. And if you do manage to acquire both of these traits, the only real downside you'll be facing is the fact you'll constantly be out of ammo since this weapon only has 8 shots before you need to reload, and we both know with so many amazing uses for these explosives, you'll be using more than 8 on a typical floor unless you actively restrain yourself. But this is where I'm going to cut things off for now. I realize there's a lot of other guns that I haven't yet covered in this video, such as the Shrink Ray or Flamethrower, but this video is getting a bit too long, and it's been way too long since I've uploaded anything on YouTube, so I'm just going to turn this into a 2-parter, so subscribe if you don't want to miss the second part where I cover those. With that said, I've been Ian, you have been you, and this has been the first part of the Streets of Rogue Firearms Guide. Thank you for watching.